Tyson.
Present.
While it may appear that some of the matters during the session today are handled quickly, I do wish to confirm that extensive preparation for these sessions have been done by each member of the board. Today's session will last until 12:15. If you wish to have an agenda of today's session, they are available on the Board of Pardons website. We will first take up under agenda item 2 what are termed calendar cases. There are 14 calendar cases. There are 3 possible outcomes. Application recommended, which means we are recommending to the governor that clemency be granted. Application denied, which means that we will not be recommending clemency at this time. Or 3, the board could hold an application under advisement. This is similar to a continuance. It could be done for various reasons if the board is not prepared to vote on a case. I want to stress that the ultimate decision to accept or reject the recommendation of this board is solely at the discretion of the governor. And the governor is not required to act on a recommendation within a specific period of time. So with that said, I will call the first calendar case to be heard by the board today with Secretary Trustee.
Thank you very much, Governor. The first case to be heard today is Cyd C Berger. So for Ms. Berger, we have Shay Rhodes and Michael Cole.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, we can begin. If any board members have questions for Ms. Rhodes or Mr. Cole.
How many years exactly has Ms. Berger been incarcerated?
From the time of her arrest in November of...
For 42 years.
42, yeah, so going on 43 years.
Correct.
And no one alleges that she actively strangled or killed the victim, correct?
Correct.
So this is very much a second degree situation where she was president and she certainly bears some responsibility, but for 43 years, what kind of an inmate has she been?
Ms. Berger has been a model inmate. Over her incarceration, she's had 2 minor reprimands. They occurred decades ago. She's completed all of her programming and she's worked on her history of trauma and abuse. She's done the hard work to improve herself physically, emotionally, spiritually, educationally. She's earned degrees and certifications. She's never been without a job. She's always been a positive part of her community. She has a reentry plan that's positive and realistic. And when we reviewed her for commutation, our superintendent said Ms. Berger takes responsibility for her crime. She's a model inmate, and I don't feel she would be a risk to the community. So the Department of Corrections believes and a request of the board that they accept the 42 years that she has served as punishment for her crime.
I would agree with that assessment, particularly since I view and I think the lens of our modern understanding of trafficking and the damage that does and the psychological harm that she endured today would certainly, I think, support that thesis that going on 43 years is absolutely more than enough punishment for someone who was not actively involved in the physical killing of the victim. And she is a model inmate, and it's my hope. I know there's some board support, but I'm unsure of others. But I'm really asking those that may be on the fence to, she did not get away with murder, and after 43 years, I don't see any value to make sure she dies in prison because I believe she can make a really positive contribution on the outside.
And if I may, the laws in the United States did not begin to recognize that the type of victimization Ms. Berger suffered and was suffering from at the time the murder took place until the year 2000, which was 20 years after the incident took place. And that was when the federal government passed the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which has been reauthorized 6 times by the federal government. And the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania did not include a definition of sexual servitude, which is sex trafficking, under Pennsylvania's law until the year 2014. So the laws have slowly but surely caught up with the ability to explain the type of victim that Ms. Berger was at the time, and also the research by sociologists and psychologists and physicians about the type of complex trauma that victims and survivors of sex trafficking have endured, and what the process it takes for them to heal and even self-identify as a victim. Again, I would say in the last decade has really made quite a few strides. So it's 20 years past the incident that the law even caught up to recognize the type of crime that Ms. Berger was suffering at the time that the murder took place. I believe that if the incident took place right now, today in 2022, or even, a few years ago, that the law now has the ability to view Ms. Berger in a wholly different light. And if a trial were to have taken place today, I think that additional evidence and information would have come forward. And of course, during conviction, mitigation, I think would have brought forth additional information about the type of complex trauma that survivors of sex trafficking endured. And I think that would have been taken into account at the time of trial and sentencing. And I do hope that the board today would take that into consideration when making your decision. Thank you.
Any other questions or feedback? Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Governor, we do have a few folks here to also speak. We have Brian Kars, and then we also have Thomas and Diane Kars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Brian. Oh, okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Brian, it looks like Brian's not here, but we do have Diane. Ms. Kars, can you hear us?
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
We can. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I was muted. So first, I'd like to thank the board again for hearing us. I do have some questions preliminary because we're shocked by all of this. We were told she could not get a reconsideration unless there was a change in circumstances, but I was told I'm not allowed to know what those change in circumstances are, which I find quite offensive. We are the victims, and how can we respond to this? I was there at all 3 trials. At no time was there any evidence or any information that Cyd Berger was trafficked. If you guys have had the chance to read the manuscripts and the transcripts from 3 trials, she actually went to a high school and pulled Dwayne Hicks out of the high school and taught him to be her pimp. That is what was testified at 3 trials. So this sex trafficking is very new information for me, and appalling. I do know that that's newer, but from the information we had in 1980, she was not sex trafficked in any way as a nurse of 48 years, 49 years. The definition doesn't fit the crime. When Bobby was murdered, we were told to trust the police, and we did. We were told to trust the reporters, and they betrayed us. We were told to trust the courts, and the murderers got 3 separate trials, which no one told us helped them, not us or Bobby, by 3 separate trials. The jury's never heard all of the information, including her going to a high school and getting Dwayne Hicks out. We were told to trust the jury, and we did. We were told to trust the system, and she got life without parole. No one told us at any time that life without a parole did not mean that. And we needed to prepare ourselves for multiple attempts to reverse the sentence. I don't know how this system allows a family to go through this over and over again. I hope you all have access to our prepared statements in December. But for now, I just want to say that her circumstances were not because of race or income or her family. I met her grandfather and several other family members, and they were lovely. They were afraid of her, scared to death of her, and they did their best to protect her children from her. She was a mother who abandoned her children, who chose a very bizarre and crime-riddled life. She chose, and I really take offense to the fact that she didn't commit murder. Even in today's laws, not a lawyer, but even in today's law, if I'm there and I'm accompanying the murderer, I am part of that crime. She planned the murder. She told them to practice. She got the equipment for which they strangled Bobby. He was handcuffed, tortured, threatened with a fake gun, and strangled and drowned, all the while she stood within feet of him. My previous statement in December stated how many times she had an opportunity to help him and to stop this crime, and she chose not to. So did she show remorse? Absolutely not. They went shopping. They went to Allegheny Center Mall and went shopping for engagement rings, 8-track tapes, and like Allegheny Center Mall, that was once a bustling, lively place, much has changed. The mall is now empty like our lives without Bobby. She didn't just kill Bobby. She murdered our hopes and dreams as a family. I hear that she's done a lot of good in prison, and we heard this again this morning, but she hasn't done anything good for us. There's been no apology, no remorse, no recognition for what she did. There was rumor last time, or statements, that she helped the police and she turned herself in. That did not happen. She fled in Bobby's car with his credit cards to another state. And then when she could have turned herself in, she lied at every chance she had, and she was remanded back to Pennsylvania. She did not come back willingly. She robbed and killed Bobby. She robbed us of having him in our lives. And I wonder all the time, what would his life been like? Would he have a wife and kids? What would our life be? Would my boys be basketball players like he was? Kills us a little every day, and even more since my husband died, his brother, because, I promised him that I wouldn't let this happen. So this family, the Carr's family, Bobby's family, vehemently rejects the possibility of parole, and we hope we can trust this board to support us, the victims of her crimes. And we appreciate you giving us the time. Oh, wait.
Well,
Wait.
say because
What?
she didn't pull the trigger.
Oh,
she
yeah.
should get out.
Yeah.
Charles Manson never killed anyone.
Yeah.
Either.
Good.
Are we letting him up?
My son, the fact that she didn't actually perform the murder, I don't believe makes her any less guilty. She planned it. She stole the stuff to strangle him with. My son just said Charles Manson didn't kill anybody. He didn't pull any triggers. Yet he planned it, and he was held for it. And I know for those of you listening, Charles Manson may not be Cyd Berger, but to us she is. We lost our brother, our friend, our uncle, our brother-in-law, my son's godfather, in the same way. So the fact that she didn't perform it, I don't think that law has changed ever. If you're there, doesn't mean you don't have to have the gun or the handcuffs or the thing you strangle somebody with. You're in the room. You practiced for 3 days. She was the ringleader. She wasn't an innocent bystander. And boy, this sex trafficking thing has thrown me for a loop, because what a horrible thing that is. That is not anything that came to light. And if you guys have that information, shame on you for not letting us have it, because I've never heard it before today. Never heard it, never knew anything about it. And there was no evidence presented in 3 trials that took 2.5 years of our lives that mentioned that in any way she was a victim of that, of any of that. She was always portrayed as the ringleader, who set it all up, who was masochistic and sadistic and requested those things to happen. Does that mean she has mental illness? Of course. But I don't think it means that she's not responsible for what happened. And I don't know if we trust the system and the system says life without parole, how do we now say 42 years is enough? I don't understand that. That is, yeah.
The laws haven't changed.
The laws have not changed according to that. Somebody will have to explain that to me. Thank you so much. If you have any questions for us, we would be here to answer them. And I'm sorry, my son Brian couldn't be here because he's a teacher and it's PSSA's week, and nobody gets out of that. So he couldn't be with us. But Ben, who's also Thomas, and Christopher are here. If you have any questions for us.
I have some questions, but Miss Grayson, I don't know if you do as well.
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. So then, ma'am, I'll ask you some questions. First of all, I want to thank you for, again, coming before this board to discuss this case. I know I can only imagine that it must be very stressful for you to have to do this. Is that a fair assumption?
Well, especially 4 months later. I mean, it's just, it's incredible. Really horrifying.
Yeah, and especially this week, which I believe is National Crime Victims Awareness Week. Yeah. So, ma'am, I want to ask you some questions about your recollection of this whole situation. So, first of all, just so we can be clear for the record, you are Bobby's sister-in-law. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what is your understanding of how long, and if you don't know this question, feel free to just tell me you don't know, but what is your understanding of how his death was? In other words, did it, from your understanding, did it occur quickly or did it take a long time to occur?
Yeah.
What do you know about that?
So I know a lot about that. I was already a nurse, had 2 young children, and I had to be present at all 3 trials. And I was a witness because I was the last person in the family to see him alive. So I was physically at every trial every day for 2 years. So when we first went to the first hearing.
Did that take a lot of time out of your life, by the way?
Oh yeah, I almost lost my job.
Really?
Yeah.
How many hours do you think you spent having to be part of this process for the murder of your brother-in-law?
Well, it takes up your whole life. I'll tell you that. You never forget it. I'm sitting in a courtroom where we come from this, normal, half crazy family. I'm a nurse, and I'm hearing these horrific things in these courtrooms week after week. I would say that it was 2.5 years, over 2.5 years time, and probably one trial was 1 week, probably 3 weeks of 8-hour days. We had very little money. You got pennies to be a witness, to stay there.
Right.
We almost went flat broke paying to park downtown to be in court every single day. When my husband and my father wanted to go and find the killers because they had taken off in Bobby's car, and the police said, "Trust us, we'll get it, we'll find it." And what I'm hearing today is not what I heard, and I heard it all.
So to get back to the question, what do you recall about his death?
So when we went to the first hearing, we did not know how he died. We just know he was dead, but we didn't know how. And the coroner testified that it took place over hours, that he was handcuffed, he was threatened with a gun, and I don't know if this will mean anything to anybody there, but I'm a nurse. They stole NG tube, which is kind of soft, pliable tube. When one of their friends was being rescued outside where they lived for a drug overdose, they stole that tubing, and that's what they were practicing to use to strangle Bobby with. Well, it's pliable and soft. So that was a very long, torturous, over 1 hour is what was said. Over 1 hour he was tortured with that. Wasn't dead yet. So then the testimony is they brought a big bowl of water in and stuck his head in the water till he stopped breathing. I don't know how long that took. They didn't say, but they just said it was hours with the tubing. So he's naked, handcuffed, a gun to his head, tubing around his neck, and still begging before they choked him to death, begged for his life for hours. Please don't do this. Please don't do this. It was all testified to. He begged to stay alive.
Ma'am,
We
and
would've given
you
him.
know, I hope it's okay for me to be asking you these questions.
No, I'm
not-
glad. I appreciate it.
I'm not trying to make things worse, but I think it is important that the record reflect your understanding. What condition, were you involved at all when he was taken to the Undertaker? The body?
Yes. Yeah. Well, his other brother, not my husband's other brother, had it going
Do you know what kind of condition the body was in when it was?
Oh, yes, it was terrible because he'd been, wrapped up and thrown over a hill.
Where was he thrown?
Into Shenley Park, and the leaf blower man found him on Monday morning. It was a freezing weekend, raining, horrible, and they wrapped him up in sheets and put belts on him. And Cyd Charisse, by the way, testified that she was mad that they threw him over the hill because she wanted him thrown in the river so they wouldn't find him. That was her idea, and that's in all three trials. So this person who was a victim herself was really the ringleader. And so I can tell you that at the funeral home, his face was so badly injured, and they had to get him to the apartment, they had slammed a trunk on his head, and when his eye was badly damaged, and it was weeping every day of the funeral. All the stuff they put in him, it was weeping like he was crying. It was horrific, but he was pretty, scratched up and beat up, and then because of the cold and the rain, his body was in terrible, terrible condition. We were approached about not having an open casket, but none of us were able to do that.
Ma'am, I'm going to stop here. We could go on, and I will just say that I don't want to make this any worse for you, but just from what you've told us here, I think it's a powerful statement of the suffering that your brother-in-law endured in this horrific act. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
Ma'am, I'd like to say a couple words. I'm Attorney General Shapiro. Good morning. You had indicated in your opening comments that you were unclear as to why we're back here. I'm not sure why you weren't told.
I have an email that says I wasn't allowed to be told.
A motion for reconsideration was granted because the board only had 4 members the last time we considered this case.
Right.
And now we have 5. And so I just wanted you to be aware of that.
But my understanding was it had to be unanimous, so that 5th person would not have made a difference.
Okay. I just wanted to answer your question for you. So you had the information. There's no reason for you to be guessing. The second issue is I want you to be aware. Ms. Rhodes spoke earlier about human trafficking. She is one important voice in this process. But you should know this board has heard from lots and lots of different people with lots and lots of different information. So I mean this is in no way to be disrespectful to Ms. Rhodes. I hold her in high regard, but that's just one piece of all of the different material the board considered. So I certainly don't challenge your perspective on the matter, ma'am. I just want you to be aware that there's a lot of information that this board has consumed as we reach this point of decision. So I really want to thank you and your family for speaking with us today, and just wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
I'd just like to echo what the Attorney General said. It took a lot of it's difficult to come in and speak before a group about this, the impact it had on you, and appreciate your time in coming in to do that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Any last questions on Cyd Berger? Thank you very much. We appreciate your time, Ms. Kars.
Thank you.
Of course. Next up, we're going to move on to Gary A. Kyles. And here for Mr. Kyles, we have Superintendent Lee Estock, and we also have Tammy Deloche. We also have Addie Kyles. Superintendent Estock, can you hear us? Oh, it says connecting to audio. Give us 1 second.
Is Ms. Kyles, is she here to testify in support?
Yes, in support.
Okay. Does the board have any questions? I mean, I certainly don't speak for the board. Is there any additional information or insight from anyone here that they feel that would add to their understanding or their vote on Mr. Kyle's application?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. All right. Secretary Trustee, we'll move on.
Okay, I'm sorry. Ms. Kyles is actually about to come in. She would like the opportunity to speak in support of Mr. Kyles.
We just want to make sure we're able to get through. So I just.
I mean, if she wants to speak, I'd like to hear what she has to say.
Yes, Ms. Kyles, it says you're still connecting to audio. Are you able to hear us? Ms. Kyles, are you able to unmute?
Can you hear?
Yes, we can. You can go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me to speak for Gary. As you can see, I'm very nervous, but I'm getting it together here. Okay, I'd like to talk about my relationship with Gary. You know, we have a very strong love bond, and it was never separated with him being within us. And so, even though we haven't been together physically, our love has never been disconnected. So I know you would like to hear about his living conditions when he gets out, if he gets out, and prayerfully, he'll be coming into a beautiful three-bedroom house, nice neighborhood where I have lived for 32 years. Gary has shown that he is more than ready to come out. He has done so much for the inmates inside that you will never know about, but I know because I've received letters and calls of how he has touched different lives in there. So I know that he will be of good value. He is released in mentorship with the children that are using guns that are going on now. So he will be of good use. He has tons and tons of support on the outside. He even has a letter from Terry Minor Spencer willing to employ him for whatever he desires to. And hopefully that the board has the letter. He has a lot of support from family and friends and church. His church, he stays in very close contact with my church. But most of all, through all this, the support from the victim's family. A few years ago, they found out that Gary was still incarcerated, which they didn't know about. But when they found out, they immediately jumped on board to help to get him out. And our family is so very grateful for their mercy and gratitude that they have shown to us. And how they found out is a story to be told, but I know that it's not enough time to tell it to you. But it's a beautiful story. And since then, we've talked together and shared stories together, cried together, prayed together. They are totally on board to see him again. You know, Gary has health issues and I have health issues, but we can take care of each other when he gets out. And to show you, you know, the story is so beautiful because it's racial business going on nowadays with black and white. You know, the world needs to hear more about the good relationships of black and white, this racial business that's going on. This white family has graciously connected themselves with our family. And what's even better, we're going to have a family reunion and our 50th one. And that goes to show you that this family is bonded 50 whole years. And something else good next month, Gary is going to have a birthday. But there's just so many good things to tell about this tragic story that had happened. But if you allow Gary to re-enter society, I'm sure that you will never regret it. He has all the love and support. I mean, so much till it just gets to be overwhelming sometimes. But we're just grateful to everyone who has been on board for Gary. The main thing in all this is the love. He won't be coming out as a celebrity, you know. He's coming out person who's being connected with love from his family and from his friends. And we just thank you for allowing me to have this time to let you know what's going on with Gary. And I know that he will be an asset to society if you have him released. God bless.
Thank you, Ms. Kiles, for your powerful testimony.
Ma'am?
Yes?
This is Dr. John Williams. Again, I don't want to, Ms. Grayson, if you have any questions, I don't want to jump ahead of you, but any questions, Ms. Grayson?
No, sir. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you for your testimony, and you know, obviously I can't speak for the rest of the board, but you know, I was definitely encouraged from what I heard from Mr. Kiles. I just had one question for you. You know, I'm the board psychiatrist. You know, I think sometimes he can get a little bit confused in the way that he sort of looks at the world and so forth. And it's conceivable that at some point in the future he may, you know, need psychiatric treatment and you know, to just sort of maybe help him make sense of things and so forth. And I can't say that for sure, but I guess my question is, and I think you've already answered this by everything you said, but is there going to be the environment there where if, you know, Mr. Kiles started to get a little bit more confused, that he would have the family supports to help him get the sort of mental health care that he might require?
I'm not sure I'm understanding the question, but I know that if he will require, which I don't think he will, but if he needs, you know, the help, he will get it from wherever he needs to get it from.
You'll help him get it if he needs any medical care or any psychiatric care.
100%.
That was my question.
Yes, 100%.
And it sounds like you have a very tight-knit family, so it's not like he would, you know, you're going to be interacting with him on a daily basis, basically.
Yes.
Is that fair to say? Okay. All right. Thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you.
Ma'am, thank you for appearing today. I'm Attorney General Shapiro. You made reference to the fact that the family of the victim is supportive of this application. I just asked the secretary, are they choosing to appear? Is there anything you can put on the record?
Absolutely. They're actually on the phone right now. They were having issues getting into the video. And so this is the sister of the victim. There are, I believe, 5 siblings, Jean Mays, and they are in support of commutation. And I'm going to put her on speaker into my microphone, so hopefully we can hear. Ms. Mays?
Yes.
Is the board able to hear Ms. Mays?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. There actually are 6 of us surviving Tony. And before I even contacted the family of Gary, I contacted each and every one of my siblings and my mother, and we're very, very close. And they all agreed that, number one, we had no idea it was life without parole for some reason that, flew out of our heads. When we found out Gary was still incarcerated, we contacted him. We told him how much we have already forgiven him. We told him he needs to forgive himself. We want to do anything we can to get him released. We visited him in the prison. He has done wonderful things during his incarceration, which I don't know how many people do that and not just give up, and it was my mother's dying wish to see him home, and we have always prayed for his mother, because 2 mothers lost a son that day, not just one. We've become very close with the family, and it would just break our hearts if Gary did not get released. We need him to come home. His family needs him to come home. His community needs him to come home. And does anybody have any questions for me?
Yes, ma'am. This is Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. I chair the board. It's more an observation. I just want to thank you for your family's compassion and mercy and perspective. And I just wanted to clarify, to drive home the point. It was your mother's dying wish that Mr. Kyles get out of prison. Is that accurate?
That is right on point. We've always prayed for his mother, because she lost her son too. And,
sure.
If my father had been alive at the time, I know he would have been supportive of this as well. Thank you.
I don't have anything further. But once again, thank you for your profound compassion and mercy.
Absolutely. We all should be like that.
Agreed.
Thank you, Ms. Mays. Any other board members have questions for Ms. Mays before we?
I just want to thank Ms. Mays for her testimony and for her mercy and her forgiveness.
My sister's here with me too,
and the group, yes.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mays. We appreciate your help. We also actually have our DOC representatives. If anybody has any questions for either Superintendent Isak or for Ms. Deloche on this case.
I do not. Thank you.
I think it's going to be hard to top the family. But thank you for making yourselves available. I think we can move on now, Secretary Trustee.
Thank you very much. The next case is Gary A. Robinson, and we also still have the same DOC representative, so this is great. Superintendent Estock, and then also Ms. Deloche.
Does the board have any questions of these esteemed public servants?
I do not.
I do not.
Is there any victim opposition? Is there any victim support? Any other witnesses?
We do not have any victim opposition or support listed for this hearing, no.
All right, with hearing no questions, I would ask that we again thank them for making themselves available and move on to the next case.
Thank you very much. Next case we're going to hear is Michael Lyons. Representatives are Superintendent Kenneth Eson and also Superintendent Mark Wall. And then we also have Omar and Erica Hobson, who are victim support.
Yes.
And they are joining.
Are they on?
Superintendents Eson and Wall, are you available? Are you on?
Are the victims are the victims' family? Are they on?
We're trying to admit them. Yes, they're on. We're just getting them connected.
I would like them brought immediately. I'm sure their testimony is going to be critical.
Wonderful. It looks like we've got folks here. Superintendent Wall's here. I'm not sure if we have Superintendent Isan yet, but it looks like we have Omar and Erica Hobson.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. It's understood that you're here. You're a part of the victim's family, and that you are here to testify in support of Mr. Lyons' commutation. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, then you have the floor. Thank you for taking time and joining us. And I would just invite you to share your thoughts.
Well, I am the youngest sister of Carl Quinn Peterson, Jr. I don't know if what I say will have any bearings on what your decision
It will actually.
Okay.
Your testimony is incredibly important, and it's very powerful to hear from a victim's family.
Okay. Well, my parents, they never vilified Michael Lyons. There's 6 of us, and Carl was the eldest, and he was cherished by them. But something I always cherish is that my parents, as Jehovah's Witnesses, trained us to never hold Michael accountable forever. Yes, he has done this heinous crime and affected all of our lives in ways that I couldn't say. I don't have much of a memory of my brother because I am the youngest, but I do know how the dynamic of what happened affected the rest of my siblings and even my brother's children. But my parents, they never felt that Michael should be sentenced without parole because they are strong believers in reform, that someone can change. And this is not to say that they didn't suffer from what they experienced, but they believe that there's a better future. We all believe that. So forgiveness has been a gift to me. It's been a gift to all of my siblings because it's helped us to not hold on to resentment. And I think it's just made us lighter people. We're not bogged down with anger. I never, actually, most of my life, I've always wondered what was going on in Michael's life. I can't speak for the rest of my siblings in that feeling, but probably because I am the youngest, I didn't have so much of an attachment to my brother, but more so to my parents' feelings. And so I just wondered if they could forgive him. He needs to know that. I always felt that, but I just never had the heart to ever reach out to him and let him know. Recently, my husband, Omar, and I, we actually did that. And I wrote him a letter. And we've been corresponding since then for about a year now. And we have gotten to know Michael quite a bit. It has been an eventful time. He has told us the events that took place that day. He's written a letter to my parents. I'm extremely nervous right now. So
You're doing wonderfully. You're doing wonderfully.
I'm losing my thought. But man, I feel like we are getting to know Michael. And that feels like a gift as well. Because I always felt, and my parents have always trained us to think this way, that when people do things, it's always for a reason. There's always everyone has a backstory. Everyone has a story. And now hearing some of Michael's story has pushed it even further to understand why this happened. So I am definitely all for Michael potentially being commuted. I think that this would be an opportunity for him to grow mentally, spiritually, most and foremost, because he needs to experience real life. I think he was so young and, in his words, stupid. And this would be an opportunity for him as an older man to experience real life and maybe even help others. He's been doing that already. And I think the broader scope of what he could potentially do for others would be remarkable. My parents are also watching today. They didn't really want to speak. So in their behalf, my father in particular, he said that he trusts the judicial system. He knows that is a record of what Michael has been doing in prison since he's been there, potentially since the last 15 years or so, what he has been doing. We all trust that. I'm at a loss for words at this point, but yes, we are all for this happening.
Thank you for your remarkable level of humanity and compassion and sharing that. And we are so sorry for the loss that actually brought us all together this morning. But I'm speaking for myself. You really, your families, you're very inspirational. We should all aspire to that level of. So thank you for joining us. Does the board have any questions or comments?
I do not. Just thank you for your appearance.
Thank you for being with us today.
We also have our DOC representatives, Superintendent Isan, Superintendent Wall available for any questions from the board.
Well, I want to again thank the family for not only their mercy but taking their time, and I want to extend the board's very best to their parents that are watching. Thank you for trusting us, and thank you for your input. We are truly grateful and give your input an enormous amount of weight. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Superintendent, just a quick question, following up from our contact during the interview. Did this kind of go through the system? Were you notified of?
Superintendent Isan, you're muted.
My apologies. Sorry. That question was directed at me, sir?
Yes.
So, no, initially I was not. After our discussion, when I returned to the facility, I did follow up and look into it and was able to verify the information in our system with Mr. Hobson, and that also having spoke with his unit team and in regards to the correspondence. So it was confirmed then, but prior to, I was not aware.
Okay, but the staff was?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for, and we also have a representative from the Philadelphia DA's office if any board members have questions.
I think we can move on, Secretary Trustee.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We appreciate your help. Next case is Felix B Ocasio. And we also have Superintendent Hauser here for Mr. Ocasio.
Does the board have any questions?
I don't.
I do not.
Okay. All right. I believe we can move on, Secretary.
Okay. Thank you very much, Superintendent Hauser. Moving on, we have William Eric Decker. We have his representative, Marjorie L. Decker. And then we also have District Attorney Matt Weintraub, who's going to be available as well.
The District Attorney.
Not seeing him quite yet. We also have Superintendent McGinley from Cole Township as well for Mr. Decker. Ms. Decker, was that you?
Yes, I'm ready.
Ms. Decker, are you able to turn your camera on?
Yes, we will. We're trying.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Nope, that's fine.
Yes, I'm ready.
Ms. Decker, are you able to turn your camera on?
Yes, we will. We're trying.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Nope, that's fine. If excuse me, quickly, if someone has the live stream up in the background, would you mind muting that so that we don't have feedback before we begin? Thank you.
I'd like to hear from the District Attorney.
I'm ready to go.
Right at this minute,
Yeah.
sir, I'm ready to go.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for joining us. What we'd like you to share your thoughts.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I do have some prepared remarks so I can stay on message. Forgive me, I don't have the benefit of the rest of what you all are considering. So just to make sure you understand where I'm coming from, as I understand it, the facts are that on August the 22nd of 1980, Mr. Decker conspired with two others, Hassan and Orlowski, to kill Albert Kellett Jr. and his wife if she were there as a witness. Hassan got the gun from his dad and gave it to Decker. Decker then entered Kellett's neighbor's apartment after seeing him, Kellett, through the window watching television with other people. Decker then entered, shot Kellett in the head, but only wounding him, although he was the target. Sorry, let me just adjust this a little. Decker then shoots Mrs. Kellett, who was pregnant, who was an innocent bystander, in the neck and the hand, injuring but not killing her. He shoots Joseph Purali, who is the neighbor's friend, completely innocent, in the head, and that's who ultimately succumbed to the murder. Decker also shoots at George Sofield, who was the neighbor, and misses him entirely, fortunately. Decker then flees, hides the evidence before getting apprehended by the police, and ultimately, and this is germane to, I'm sure, your consideration, he enters into an agreement with the Commonwealth, although not me, obviously, but with my predecessor, for a life sentence in exchange for a guilty plea and testimony against his co-defendants, Hassan and Orlowski, which he received the benefit of that bargain. Some of the facts that I felt that were important to consider in weighing my position were that there were a total of not one but four victims who the defendant specifically shot at, not only shot at, but with intent to kill. The one man that was killed was wholly innocent in this matter. This was not a spur of the moment killing, as often is the case, I'm sure, but rather this was planned over the course of 2 months with repeated efforts to get a suitable gun and specific discussions to kill the target's wife, as well as the target, so that the wife could not be a witness. And I believe that these are aggravating factors. Decker also made the decision to finally attempt the murder after being angered by a confrontation with Kellett, which Decker himself started. Careful planning was done in finding the right gun for the job, which also indicates a lot of premeditation. There was a debate as to when and where to do this, to commit this murder. So, scouted locations and strategies were considered. Decker also picked concealing clothing to hide his identity and asked for specific payment. So this was clearly a murder for hire. There was ample time for Mr. Decker to stop the chain of events at any point along the chain, and he even took several minutes prior to entering the house specifically to decide if it was what he wanted to do. So this was a very measured and considered decision by Mr. Decker. He shot at all the witnesses in the room, and fortunately, by the grace of God, he missed one person, but hit every other target, even those not involved in this underlying drug dispute. In his testimony himself at trial, Mr. Decker testified that he did aim at each person's head with the specific intent to kill them. The person that was killed, as I mentioned earlier, was wholly innocent and was merely a friend of the target's neighbor, so twice removed. Not that any killing would have been justified, but this person was really an innocent bystander. The neighbor's only error was that he was invited there to watch television. Luckily, the neighbor whose TV they were watching was missed. I think what makes this particularly additionally egregious is that the bullet hit Mr. Kellett's wife in the neck and the hand while she survived, with his specific intent to kill her after deliberating with the group because she was a potential witness for that sole purpose. And I do also think that it's aggravating that she was pregnant at the time. I will concede, certainly as in many cases that we are asked to negotiate and to consider in this fashion, that Mr. Kellett's actions made him a person with unclean hands in this because this was as a result of some kind of prior negotiation or drug deal. But certainly even his participation up to that point did not justify that he would have been the target of a killing, as is sometimes the case. Following the shooting, Mr. Decker fled. He concealed the evidence of his murder in a child's sandbox, and he made sure that he wiped his fingerprints off of the gun. Next, what I'd like to discuss are the legal underpinnings for at least my recommendation to the board. And that is the first, and I think the main consideration for the board, in my opinion, is that Mr. Decker received a huge break at the outset of this case. And I grant you this was decades ago, but that break nevertheless must be considered. And that is that this was certainly warranted as a death penalty case at its inception, which had, in addition to not only the murder that Mr. Decker was successful in committing, but 3 additional attempted murder victims. Mr. Decker did agree and did, in fact, testify against the co-defendants in exchange for being granted a life without parole sentence. And I know that these things change over the course of years, but that certainly was a real possibility, the specter of the death penalty in 1980. As I said, I acknowledge that he did hold up his end of the bargain, but a bargain is something between 2 parties. So at this point, and frankly, for here on after, unless circumstances change, and we may be here again at some other time, we would seek to have Mr. Decker held up to his end for which we bargained. I would also note, this is very important because this was an additional part of the bargain that he gained a benefit, a huge benefit, and that is that he received concurrent sentences on the other attempted murder charges. And basically got the benefit of being sentenced to concurrent sentences, means he was sentenced for 3 additional victims for nothing. I think that that's important for the board to consider. And he now wants the board to, as is his right, to intervene and supersede that agreement that he made with open mind, knowing and intelligently, to supersede that agreement and give him something greater than he bargained for at the time. He wants 2 bites at this apple, not to put it too cutely. The other thing I think that Mr. Decker notes, but it's important to note in the absence, is that Mr. Decker lacks each victim's family's support for his petition for clemency. And in fact, in his petition, he only considers the family of one of his victims. I think that it's very important for us, since we at the Commonwealth's in the District Attorney's Office, we represent all victims, that no crime against any victim should go unpunished. And I think that Mr. Decker's standing would be a little bit better improved if he had considered or sought some support from all of the victims in this case, not just his homicide victim. But I just don't have any indication either way as to whether he even sought that forgiveness from the Kellets or the Sofields. Determining whether an outcome solely on the basis of whether a homicide victim's family is forgiving in nature, solely on that basis, I think would be somewhat arbitrary and capricious. Some people are incredibly forgiving, and some people are not. I think that should be a factor, but I don't think that should be the only factor. Due process must be considered. I would also note that Mr. Decker, while he writes a compelling petition for clemency, does not truly take the responsibility that we would expect to see after such a heinous crime. He claims that these violent crimes were irrational and impulsive, and blames his drug use, which is behind him. I think that the planning and all of the opportunities to withdraw from this conspiracy, of which he was the main motivator and operator, belie that fact that this was irrational and impulsive. These acts were calculated and deliberate, planned over more than 2 months, and carried out even after he stopped to consider going through with the murder just before entering the house. His own testimony at his co-defendant's trial was that the drugs did not affect him mentally. I think he's had time to reflect on this, certainly over the ensuing decades, and understands that if, at least if he puts in here that this was a process of drug use, that's something that he can correct, and is what he's trying to put his best foot forward to the board. But I don't think that his current statement about that is worthy of belief. He states that he regrets his actions, in which he tries to blame his drug use and to some extent his co-defendants. But he is not accepting moral responsibility that his actions were morally wrong, only that he regrets them. And I know that's a subtle thing, but that's something that I certainly consider. He does blame his co-defendants, and they are blameworthy. But I think that really it was he, Decker, who made the final decision to kill Kellett. And frankly, were he not the operator, the person with the gun that insisted that they go forward with this, I truly believe that this murder and these attempted murders would not have occurred. And as proof of that, there's a statement where Decker says, "Tonight's the night. This cat's got to go," and demanded $250 and to be provided with the gun. So he clearly is the catalyst for this. In another essence, he recasts the facts in his testimony to now appear less involved in the planning. And he is dismissive of the fact that he was the one actually who instigated the confrontation. I know that with the passage of time, we tend to soften our views of history to put ourselves in a light most favorable. And frankly, I give him credit. He's advocating for his release. So that does make sense. But I think that belies the actual facts which he testified to all those decades ago. I also would point out that he does not truly express remorse. He claims to be remorseful and accepting of his actions. You've got to give him some credit for that. But his remorse, at least as I read his petition, only appears to extend to James Pirelli and his family. But I once again point out that he got 3 free victims here. And frankly, had he not gotten 3 free victims, maybe we would hear remorse from Mr. Decker about what he did to those people. But as a matter of practicality, I guess he doesn't really need to address that because they're not a part of his petition, his clemency petition. But in real life, I would have liked to have seen that. He also makes a little mention of the other 2 people he seriously wounded and the innocent neighbor who he missed, but is nevertheless a victim. And it's very hard for me to get around the fact that he shot Mrs. Kellett while she was pregnant, but expresses no remorse for that. I know that, I would have to take at face value Mr. Decker's record in jail. I don't have the benefit of those records, but I would like to make a couple of points. He places great emphasis on the fact that he has been drug-free since 1985. I would have to accept that at face value. But the fact needs to be taken in context. He was jailed in 1980, which I guess you could assume the negative, that from 1980 to 1985, he had access to some drugs while in jail, but that's ancient history. I will concede that. But frankly, when you're in jail, I think there's at least a modest or reasonable expectation that you should be drug-free. So I don't know how much weight you should give to that. He claims he's misconduct-free for 30 plus years, and if that is in fact the case, he certainly should get credit for that. He lists his completed classes, certifications, and licenses, indicating that he took advantage of the programs offered by the Department of Corrections. He should get credit for that. But I would say that there is nothing exceptional or extraordinary in my mind that would justify wiping away the life sentence for committing these horrific acts. The fact that he took advantage of programming and is drug-free is meritorious and admirable, but I just don't think when you put them on the scales to weigh against each other, that it bodes in favor of clemency. And so to conclude, Chairman, I believe that to grant Mr. Decker clemency at this time would be to discount the harm to all 4 of his victims, including the unborn child. It would depreciate the seriousness of his crimes that he committed, and would also usurp the role of the criminal justice plea bargaining process, because we have an expectation that where one side makes a bargain and can hold the other side to it,
Mr. District Attorney, I just want to say, I found your argument compelling, and I thought it was very well presented and thoughtful. You brought up a lot of good points. So thank you for joining us this morning. I thought it was very valuable, a really important perspective. So
I have one question for the DA. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, after the general.
Go ahead. I'll stay in order, John. You're up before me. Go ahead.
Okay, Ms. Grayson, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Okay. Thank you, District Attorney. I appreciate you coming here and your giving that presentation. Just a couple questions for you. Do you feel that if Mr. Decker had been a little bit of a better shot, that this might have turned into a mass murder situation?
Well, I don't feel it. I know it for a fact. But you don't get credit for missing.
Okay. And do you the victim who was pregnant? Do you know how pregnant she was at that time?
I don't factually. I'm sorry.
Okay. And did I hear you correctly saying that that you believe that Mr. Decker specifically aimed at the heads of each of the victims?
I don't just believe it. I think that those facts are in the record. He testified to that.
Okay. And do you believe that if and actually another question, do you believe that this was a murder for hire?
But by his own admission, he got $250 to go kill at least one, if not two people, and tried to kill four, and would have killed five, given the one pregnant victim.
Okay. And do you feel that Mr. Decker, if released, would be a public safety risk?
That I could not comment on. I just don't know how he's adapted to prison life. But I feel that the main reason for my testimony is that he's gained the benefit of his bargain, and so we should be entitled to have the benefit of ours because of the incredible casualty and attempt to commit loss of life at the time of his crimes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We also have Superintendent McGinley and Marjorie L. Decker available in support.
Mr. Gerbenek, did you have any questions or no?
No, General.
Okay. District Attorney Weintraub, thanks for being here. I think you mainly answered my question in your response to Dr. Williams. Decker stated that he was an associate with those two defendants that were with him, Hassan and Orlowski, I think is how you pronounce it. And there was some indication from him that he was just sort of led along in this, that he was just kind of there and not kind of the active participant. I guess I'd like you to just respond to that. That was something that Mr. Decker himself kind of put forth as an argument.
Yeah, that's belied by the testimony. General Shapiro at trial, he claimed that he was the guy that finally said, "Put up or shut up." He was the one that insisted that they go through with the murder. He insisted on payment. He insisted on the gun. And were it not for him, I truly believe, based on my 29 years of law enforcement experience, that this murder and none of these attempted murders would have occurred. He was the catalyst, and he was the main motivator behind all of these crimes.
And then I think the Secretary indicated that one of the victim's family members is here. Your understanding, I think you said this earlier, that of the three victims, one of the victim's family members support this and the other two do not support this commutation. Is that your understanding?
Just to be very fair about it, General, we don't have any indication of their support. I think that they've just essentially been neglected.
Who has been neglected? The other two, if you will, or who?
Yes, the other three. Yes, that's correct.
Other three. I apologize. Okay. And what do you mean by that they were neglected?
Well, if I understand it correctly, Mr. Decker's petition pertains really to his homicide charge because that's the one that's keeping him in. But if you take a full view of this thing, it would be incredibly helpful to understand that Mr. Decker expresses remorse for shooting at and striking and shooting at and missing his other 3 victims. And we see none of that in his petition. And I think it would also be very helpful to hear what they have to say about whether they would be in support of his clemency or not. I will concede they wouldn't have a direct impact because they're not technically the victims of the homicide, but certainly would be helpful to know as members of society who were directly impacted by his crime.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Yeah, I have a question. Is it fair to say that if you'd have known, if your office would have known that he'd be pursuing a pardon application down the line, you would have charged him separately for the other attempted murders?
He was charged separately for the other attempted murders. It's hard for me to judge what was considered.
I guess I asked it poorly. Would you have wanted the sentence structured differently, that it would have been whether it's a detainer or it would have been consecutive, not concurrent?
Yes, absolutely correct. I would have fashioned it so that he had to serve each sentence consecutive to the other. So that is it fair to assume that your office did not do that because the understanding was that he was pleading to the top charge? And that he was bargaining for a life without parole sentence.
Yeah, well, that's the top charge. Yeah,
I wasn't the guy, but I think that's
yeah. Okay, so that's a fair clarification. Okay, I don't have any further questions. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
We also have Superintendent McGinley and then Marjorie L. Decker for support. And General Shapiro, I just wanted to clarify, Marjorie L. Decker is related to Mr. Decker. Okay, are there any questions for either Ms. Decker or Superintendent McGinley about Mr. Decker?
I have a question for Superintendent McGinley.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, can you hear me, folks?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful.
Okay, Superintendent McGinley, thank you. I just have a question or sort of one area I want to ask you about. Would you agree that the vote sheet for Mr. Decker from 2020 was unanimous in support of his commutation?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Now, going back 6 years, and I think the the general kind of addressed this yesterday, but I wanted to just sort of focus on this as well. Are you aware of a vote sheet from 2014, 6 years earlier, in which it was unanimous that he not be recommended for commutation?
Yes, and I'd like to expand upon that.
Sure, and let me just sort of set this up a little bit here. So, as far as the no sheet from March 6th of 2014, I just want to read a couple quotes here. So it's a little hard to read all of the handwriting here, but Counselor Gansel says a murder for hire case with 3 other victims cannot be overlooked. Counselor Corey says the nature of his offense does not warrant commutation. Ms. Folds, unit manager, writes, it cannot be overlooked that he essentially shot at 4 victims, one of which was pregnant. No amount of rehabilitation outweighs the severity of his crime. Psychologist Falks, or it's with an F. Mr. Decker articulates his crime, but leaves out specific details, which I found to be very interesting that the psychologist sort of points this out, because I think what District Attorney Weintraub was sort of saying was consistent with that. Ms. Chismar says multiple victims involved in the crimes. Major Baumbach, this is not appropriate for commutation consideration. Major Brumfield, no remorse. And I can't read the next two. So could you? I'm just curious how there could be such a just total change within 6 years from this initial vote sheet.
Well, I know the Attorney General had asked me about that. I was unfamiliar with that process at the time because I was actually I was at SCI Muncie at the time. I came back here as a superintendent in January of 2016, and I believe that the executive staff had reaffirmed the decision from 2014, hence light the 2016 date, which I was a little confused on. With that being noted, I reviewed that record in entirety. And interesting to note, just a few weeks prior to that vote that you had relayed, he had facility support. Superintendent Damouni at the time, along with the majority of the staff you stated, supported Mr. Decker's commutation. There was only 2 staff on that vote sheet, both deputy superintendents, who did not. And the major issue at the time when I researched that, and this was only a couple weeks prior to the vote sheet you referenced, the deputy noted about the woman who was pregnant at the time of the shooting. Apparently, just from my conversations, my follow-up after the initial hearing down at central office with the individuals, some of the individuals on that vote sheet who are now in my managerial roles, they had stated that they were asked to do a second vote sheet based upon the information related to the individual who was pregnant at the time being a victim of this crime. So, would I have conducted that business that way? The answer is no, because I would expect my staff to have all the information in front of them, make a decision based upon their interview with the inmate and what's within the reports. So if they missed that in the initial report, if the unit team missed that in the initial report, I would have, as a superintendent, a personal issue with that because I thoroughly review all reports in front of me. So
I'm sorry. Could I ask you a question?
Yes.
And I'm sorry if I'm like slow on the uptake here, but are you saying that there's another vote sheet that actually even several weeks before this vote sheet that actually says what the 2020 vote sheet says?
That's correct, sir. And they had restaffed Mr. Decker at the time and used the second vote sheet as their final vote. And they used the information specific from what I had seen related to the shooting of the female who was pregnant as a catalyst. If you review the comments of those same individuals on the first vote as compared to the second, they are much different and much more supportive, obviously, because they did support him. There was only 2 staff at the time that did not. So I was concerned with the process just in general. Now, when it came to his most recent staffing, I had known Mr. Decker for 6 years. I've been in his company for 6 years. I know what he has done inside the institution. I know what his abilities to mentor the populace and just have a good plan, a reentry plan to forge ahead. And I know the support he has received from the victim of his murder in terms of their family. That meant a lot in his processing, and just his atonement for what he has done has meant a lot to me personally. And just seeing him in his everyday stature within this facility, I believed had earned him that opportunity.
Now, sir, there's a lot of data we have to go over, and so I might have missed this, but the initial DOC commutation package didn't contain the 2014 one, and it certainly didn't contain the other 2014 one. So I'm just, to your knowledge, has that sort of original 2014 vote sheet been sent to this board?
It has. I had actually, when I after the Attorney General had asked me about that prior process, I came back and I reviewed it more thoroughly, and I forwarded both vote sheets to the attention of my contact, who then had relayed that she would upload it to the board.
Okay, I'll look for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paris, did you have anything?
No.
Yeah, I think I'm actually more confused now than I was the other night, respectfully. I mean, our records indicate that our document says 2016. I think you're referring to it as 2014. Nevertheless, the point's the same. You said that the applicant presents, quote, major public safety risks, and his propensity for violence and committing further violent acts in the community presents community safety issues. That's your document. You presented that to this board, and then you've had intervening documents that take a different position. You have to understand that's pretty jarring when you're saying you're the ones that know this applicant the best, and you're saying he presents a major public safety risk. That's concerning, and so I'm a bit more confused now, given the answers you just gave to Dr. Williams about another document. Do you want to take 60 seconds and try and clarify this for us?
Absolutely, Attorney General. Here's the synopsis of what you have. You have a document from 2016. Again, I was not the superintendent of the facility until January of 2016. The staffing of Mr. Decker was in 2014. That's factual. What you have in front of you was an updated executive summary in which the secretary reaffirmed the decision of 2014, stating that they were upholding the basically non-support of Mr. Decker for commutation based upon that vote sheet that came down. So was there two vote sheets? Absolutely. The second one was not favorable to Mr. Decker. The first one was, for whatever reason at that time, and for reasons I've been told, which I've already relayed to the board, apparently had to do with the pregnant women.
So
I'm sorry.
No, pardon me. I didn't mean to speak over you. You finish your sentence, then I'll ask a follow-up.
I believe that he was reprocessed based upon the information when they realized that one of the victims was pregnant.
Right. So you're not saying one vote sheet cancels out the other. They both kind of coexist. You're just making the point that there are two sheets, not just one.
Correct. The second vote sheet would cancel out the first because it was done. Yes, it was done later, and hence the no support. The first vote sheet, the superintendent actually listed that his co-defendant was already commuted in his support.
So number one vote sheet is support, for lack of a better term. Number two vote sheet is the public safety risk, and number two cancels out number one.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that, sir.
You're welcome.
Secretary Trustee, we move on to the next case.
We do have. Do we have Marjorie Decker?
Yes.
Ms. Decker, are you available to speak with the board?
Yes.
Any questions for Ms. Decker? Oh, Ms. Decker, do you have a statement you wanted to read?
Yes, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Dear Honorable, and excuse me, I have a cold too. Dear Honorable Board of Pardons, my name is Marjorie L. Decker, and I am William Eric Decker's sister. And I'm writing this letter to show my support in favor of William, we call him Eric Decker, being pardoned for the crime he committed a few weeks after his 21st birthday. When my brother went to prison, it was a traumatic event for our family, although understandably not as traumatic as the event for the victim's family. I have always stood by my brother, considering he was a victim of doing drugs and therefore committed this crime. My brother made a decision to confess his crime and pay the consequences in prison so far for, and it's actually 42 years, not 44 years. In this whole time, my sister Judy and I have supported him and visited him often. We have seen the dramatic changes in my brother since he accepted Jesus Christ as his personal savior. Because of the change in Eric's life and the joy he showed on his face since that day while in prison, it made me also change my life by accepting Jesus as my personal savior. Eric went to college while in prison, and he also took a bricklaying apprenticeship program. I do not know the actual course name. He completed all the courses the prison required of him, and finally now he has a 5-0 vote in favor to have an opportunity to be released from prison. My apartment is open to him, and I will make sure he is accountable to all the things required of him once he is released. My brother is a wonderful man, full of compassion for people. He works hard to accomplish his goals, and he has always been a benefit to me with his changed life. I see absolutely no reason he should not be released. The young man he committed the crime against, my brother, anguish is over. Still, the mother and sisters of that man forgave my brother, and I'm asking you to pardon my brother. I know he will be a fine man like he is now upon his release. I will do everything in my power to make sure he is well taken care of. He has already shown while there that he is a responsible person and no threat to society. Sincerely, Marjorie L. Decker.
Thank you, Ms. Decker.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Moving on, Secretary.
Yep. Next is Mr. David L. Lee. We have Joanne.
What do we have for Mr. Lee?
We have Joanne Troutman, and then we also have Superintendent McGinley.
Is there any victim opposition or support?
Ms. Troutman and then Superintendent McGinley are here to support.
No. Is there victim support?
Not here today, no.
Okay. All right. So does the board have any questions of the Department of Corrections representatives?
I do not.
I do. Thank you again, sir. Just wanted to ask you, and I had a discussion with Dr. Malashek yesterday over lunch about, we didn't go out to lunch, it's like during the lunch break, about Mr. Lee. So basically my concern as a student of personality testing and so forth was that, and I won't get too much into the technical stuff here, was that, Mr. Lee sort of, first of all, he had a potentially invalid personality test, and it was invalid in the sense that he was sort of presenting himself as being this, sort of like person, without flaws, kind of this incredibly virtuous person, despite the fact that he's been serving 33 years on a first degree murder charge. And so what I'm asking you about is two things. First of all, how do you think he views himself? Do you think he has a realistic attitude about his strengths and his weaknesses, or do you think he is just this person who thinks that he's just he has no problems, and everyone should understand that? That's my first question.
I would state, sir, that no, in my discussions with Mr. Lee and just being around him for all these years, I could tell you that he's been part of not only our mentoring components, but our Lifeline organization here, who has, developed outside, as far as individuals that come in from the outside regarding the ACEs program and trauma and everything else. Mr. Lee acknowledges his flaws and always has with me. And in a sense, he portrays himself in that light to individuals in the program that he ran here, Dare to Care. It's about identifying your own flaws to the men that were coming in here in order for them to identify theirs and come to a realization on how to address them. So he was always, when I sat in on those programs, that had acknowledged his own shortcomings and was quick to do so. So he does not portray himself in that manner within the institution.
Okay, and is it your understanding that the last misconduct he has had was actually in 2006?
That is correct.
And so there's been nothing since then.
No, sir. He's been a model inmate for me.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Does the board have any other questions? Moving on, Secretary.
Just Ms. Troutman, did you have anything you wanted to say on behalf of Mr. Lee? Ms. Troutman, can you hear us? Oh, no, I'm sorry. It looks like she froze. Ms. Troutman, oh, you froze for a minute. Would you mind?
Can you hear me?
You're breaking up.
Yeah. Hang on a second. Can you hear me?
If you could try to move to a place where you might have a bit better reception, or stand in a specific place, but you're breaking up.
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll try not to move. I apologize. So, I just want to kind of reinforce, I think the Attorney General asked the other day when David presented himself, whether, this is the way that he presents himself at all times. And I've been working with Mr. Lee on trauma-related programming inside Cole Township for about 5 years. And I can tell you unequivocally that he is who he is, regardless of the audience. This man is genuine. He's honest. He is unwavering in his commitment to better himself and, to better the community and better others. I have absolutely not one reservation about him becoming part of the community at large and really continuing to grow and develop. I've watched him do that again over the course of the last 5 years, and he is just, sounds trite, but quite simply a remarkable man. Probably one of the most transformed individuals I've ever had the opportunity to meet during my course of doing this work. So I just want to say thank you to the board for your consideration of his commutation. I am committed, as I know many others are, to supporting him. I have no doubts whatsoever, no reservations.
Ma'am, this is Dr. Williams. You are a psychologist, correct?
No,
hello?
I am a community leader. I'm a trauma trainer. But no, I am not a psychologist.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? By the way, you're freezing.
Yes, I can. I'll shut my video off so you can maybe it doesn't.
I just want to make sure that the issue was not on my end. Yeah. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So you are not familiar with I don't know if you heard the discussion around the personality testing that I had with Superintendent McGinley.
I did hear it, and no, I am not familiar with it. I am, for all intents and purposes, a lay person. I do have some, as I said, I'm a trauma trainer. I have some background and training in brain development and, community and population health, as well as individual mental health. But no, I am not a psychologist, nor am I a counselor.
Okay, then I'll defer my questions. Okay, thank you.
Any last questions for Ms. Troutman?
Moving on.
Thank you very much. The next case we're going to hear is Jose G. Laporte. We have DSCS Clark and CCPM Ollinger here from DOC.